Greetings, magnificent souls, to the Attract Health, Build Wealth podcast, where we have open and honest discussions about ourselves. This is a place where we break down, break away, and break through codependency, allowing ourselves to attract health, build wealth, and live a peaceful life. We are tired of being sick and tired. We are tired, but we are not giving up. We know that there is something magnificent inside of us, and because we are fighting daily, hourly, and by the minute, fighting ourselves, our kids, our spouses, we have to do things differently. We have to break the cycle. We don't have a million chances. We have to be happy now. We have to find a way. So, how do we do that? How is that possible? If you look around at what society is telling you, they tell you that what we're doing is impossible. Yet it's happening every single day. And it's happening through the practice and love that we call awakening the magnificent soul. We are all magnificent souls, and these are our stories of healing. Today in episode 45, I welcome the amazing Hannah Taylor to the podcast. We talk about so many juicy topics like codependency in pop culture. We talk about how to reframe your why questions and how we might punish ourselves as codependents. But before we get into the discussion, don't forget to let me know your thoughts about this episode, any feedback you have, or anything you'd like me to cover on future podcasts at epiphanyvault.com. Remember, you can share anonymously. It is a safe place, and I would welcome the discussion. So today's episode, Hannah Taylor focuses on relationships and relational patterns in her work that she does. She runs a 6-week-long small interactive coaching group to help women and men relate effectively and get more intimacy. And I really connected with her in our discussion on this interview, and I hope you do as well. Here is Hannah Taylor. All right, welcome Hannah to the podcast. I am going to start with the standard question that we do ask here, which is, what do you know about codependency, and or how has it touched your life?
Hello, happy to be here.
Yes.
So my working definition of codependency is when I need you to need me. And so a codependent relationship is really based on the idea that, or the like internal belief that unless someone needs us, we're not really worthy. That our worth depends on how much we have to offer other people and how much other people need us. And this has touched my life personally and professionally. I worked in juvenile corrections for 3 years, and I saw codependency at the root of a lot of the kids' suffering and at the root of a lot of the addiction cycles that a lot of the kids were in. It was a great way for them to get love, to be in need from the people that they knew. For myself, my mother had very much a codependent relationship with my stepfather. I was young when my father passed away, so I don't maybe her relationship was codependent with my dad too. But it's really, honestly, I think it's in all of us. I don't think that we can really escape it. Those tendencies are just there, and they are echoed through all of like pop culture. You can see codependency in especially country music. I don't know if anyone listens to country music, but you can hear it there. And I like to also call it toxic monogamy sometimes. So it's like, if I didn't have you, I would be totally dead. Like, you're my one and only forever and ever. So that's how I think about codependency. It's really based around being in need and using your need to or the other person's need to validate your worth or to get attention or get your need for love met.
Yeah. I think we talked about this too when we discussed coming on the podcast about a week ago, but the definition that I've come up, so I talk about, obviously, like, I'm a geek about codependency. Like, somebody asked me what I do. I do a lot of things, but I host a podcast about codependency. And so that kind of is a conversation starter about, well, what is codependency? And then a lot of times it goes into either, well, isn't that good? Isn't codependency a good thing in a relationship? And then it also goes into how codependency works in addiction dynamics. So there's a whole bunch of things that we could talk about with that. But what I found with my study is my definition, and I've talked about this too on the podcast a lot, is a complete break from oneself. So at the root of my shame and my fear, I completely lost myself. And whether that be, at different times it was a person for sure, but then at other times it was food, or at other times it was, whatever the Band-Aid was at the time. So I don't know. I think it's interesting to think about, defining, and what's interesting too is my most listened to podcast is the very first one, which is What is Codependency? And I feel like it's interesting to talk about the definition and maybe the misconceptions about it as well. I think it helps people.
Yeah, the like codependency being a good thing is like absolutely true as long as both partners are perfectly equally codependent, which is really hard. That's a tough one to achieve. And actually, I don't know if you've heard anything about ask culture versus guess culture. There's been a meme circulating that really like describes this. Actually, like 3 different people sent it to me and they were like, "You'd like this?" And I'm like, "Yes, I'm very familiar with it." But I myself practice a lot of alternative relationship practices. I'm polyamorous and consider myself more of a relationship anarchist than anything else. And so for me, a relationship doesn't look like any one thing. And so when people are like, "Oh, this is like good or bad or whatever," I'm just like, no, like it could work for any number of people. But really, I believe that we're only in relationships that serve us. And so it might be serving a belief that is defunct. It might be serving in a really inefficient way. It might be serving a core belief that really underlies everything, despite the attempts that you're making to create something else on top of that belief.
Mm-hmm.
But more than anything, what I see is this type of painful relationship really serves to like highlight that underneath, that like core belief that's really like kind of like the rocky foundation that you're building on. And so when you're in enough pain in a relationship, you're like, "Oh wait, I have to figure something else out." And that's when people get to like, "Oh, this belief that I'm not worthy. Oh, this belief that I have to earn love." And earning love is one of the key components to codependency that I see as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. For sure. I talk about that too. I think about that a lot. What you said a couple seconds ago was like you said, you started off by saying it's codependency is good if it's equal on both sides. But what I found is in my relationships and the relationships that I've modeled, let's be honest here, is the excessiveness on either side. It's like it's not balanced. It's either, this person is really needy or very time consuming and doesn't really, to say it sounds like it's simple, but it's not, because, that those types of behaviors and the search for love, like you just said, it kind of like combines in this like perfect codependency whirlwind. So I talk about extremes, like for me, I'm on this extreme submissive side of things, which is, I will do anything, or I would have at one point do anything for anyone and not think about what the consequences would be for me. Well, I would attach to, and the relationship that I was in was an 8-year relationship. And, that was, it was a take. He just take. So I think that's a good point to point out.
Yeah. And I love to rest in the paradox myself. So resting in the kind of paradox where what you're talking about is definitely out of balance, right? Mm-hmm. And at the same time, it's perfectly balanced. The fact that you're going to give and give and give and give and give means that you are perfectly balanced by someone who's willing to take and take and take.
Right.
Because people who are honestly, like whether you're the giver or the taker, this is a conversation that really rests on boundaries, and it rests on neither person having boundaries. Once you have boundaries, you can't relate to people who don't have them, even if they're the givers, even if they're like overflowing with love. And this is the thing that I would love for givers to really understand, which is that, sorry, this is like making a weird shadow on my face. The thing that I would love for people who are givers to understand is that people who have solid boundaries and would not cross your boundaries won't relate to you, because they don't want you to be sacrificing yourself, and they can't trust you to not sacrifice yourself. It's actually one of the first things that I say to my partners is, I only want you to do what you want to do. I want you to say no to me if you don't want to do it. And I want you to get comfortable with the idea that you're going to hurt me. And I want you to be willing to hurt me for the sake of your truth. I think there's like so much going around. Oh, it'd be the worst thing ever to hurt your partner. That's like, especially for men. Oh, men. I love men so much. And they're so afraid of hurting their female partner because then they're the monster, the irredeemable monster. Mm-hmm. And yet, if you can't actually be honest in a relationship if you're not willing to hurt your partner, and if you're not willing to trust that your partner can recover from those minor hurts that are really based around your partner's truth.
So how did you get to where you were in your mindset? Like, if you suffer, you saw some codependency patterns, a lot of people I know listening out there, based off of what people are telling me, is, the why and the how. Why am I here? How did I get here? How do I get out? Boundaries from personal experience. And I really do think that it's something that I'm going to have to cultivate through the rest of my lifetime, just because I wasn't practiced in that. And a lot of my the people that I'm close to are not used to kind of a new way of doing things, a new paradigm in my life. And so that's a challenge. And I know, like I said, based off of the feedback that I've been getting on the podcast, that is a question. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Ooh, you just asked a lot of things.
I know, it's a lot. I know.
Okay. The first thing I want to address is the question of why. One of the very best reframes that I can offer to anybody who wants to change their life is not, why am I doing this? Change every why question into a what question. So if the question is, why am I still in this relationship? You would change that, because that's kind of accusatory. Actually, why questions are, if you eliminate them from your vocabulary, all of your communication will smooth out instantly. It's really insane. If you never ask anybody why, and you just ask them what or how, that's like a huge thing. I actually got that from a
challenge. Let's try that. Let me try this today. Okay.
Yeah, it's really good. So instead of, why are you talking to me like that? What's going on with you? You don't usually talk to me like that. Right? But why are you talking to me like that? It's like, well, because I'm, right? And then you're in a conflict. But the what question really helps. So if someone were asking themselves, why am I in this relationship? I would invite them to ask a what question instead, which is, what makes this the right relationship for me right now? And not to answer it with nothing, because something makes this the right relationship for you right now. And it might be just the tiniest, stupidest reason, but if you're unwilling to look for the real reason why, or the what that's keeping you in this relationship, if you're unwilling to claim that there is something that's keeping you in the relationship, even if you get out of that relationship, you're going to create it right in the next one. So, and you had asked about my personal story. Do you want to get into that? Or we can go into boundaries too.
Yeah, whatever you feel comfortable with. It just makes me, I'm percolating over here. But, it just, because I just know, I feel like I know my audience pretty well. And I know that, at least for me, and it's, really this is just about telling stories and overcome, the things that we've all overcome. But I just know that that's a question. And I felt just so lost, and it was just too hard to do with boundaries and how do you get to a point where you just say, I'm done with this? Like, I'm claiming me now. If you want to, if you want to.
For me, a huge part, it was all humility. I had to recognize that I was creating it, and I had to exit a space where there's fault or blame in order to claim that I was creating it. Because if I am in a space where there's blame or fault or punishment, and I recognize myself as the cause, then I'm blaming myself and punishing myself, and I can't actually create the thing that I really want, which is a life full of joy. Mm-hmm. But if I recognize that I am responsible and that everything has been serving me, it's a lot easier to notice like where I am in my story, because the answer is that for me, number one, just so many of my very close family members and a very close friend died. They just died. So I had to see how short life was. And I dealt with a lot of grief really early on. My father died when I was 5. My mom died when I was 23. And she died at 49. And my dad died at 33. So I had to see, like, hey, this is how long your life could be. How do you want it to go? And then the other answer is I was in a ton of relationships, so many relationships. And I was forced to face that this can't be every man. This has to have something to do with me. If I'm seeing the same pattern in every relationship that I'm in, then I have to see that it's really me that's creating this. And so that was part of it. And seeing people in emotionally abusive relationships was part of it. Engaging in emotionally abusive relationships was part of it for me. And I just really see that everything, a lot of people would look at my life and like label like tragedy, 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 tragedy. And I just don't believe in that. I think that there's reality, and reality is correct. And you know it's correct because it's happening. This comes from Byron Katie, Loving What Is. Did you read that?
What? Yes, I'm almost done with it, and it's incredible.
Incredible. Yeah. And then teaching cognitive behavioral therapy in juvenile corrections. I led treatment groups on that. And cognitive behavioral therapy is really one of the best ways to really create space between the way that I'm thinking, the way that I'm feeling, and the way that I'm acting. Because a lot of these things are smushed together. Mm-hmm. And you know that they're smushed together when you say something like, I feel like you don't care about me. Anytime you say, I feel like, or I feel that, you're actually talking about a thought. I think that you don't care about me. That makes me feel hurt or sad. And then I claim that you don't care about me, right? So that's like the thought, feeling, and action. So cognitive behavioral therapy comes in so many varieties these days. Byron Katie's work is pure cognitive behavioral therapy. Nonviolent communication by Marshall Rosenberg, that's cognitive behavioral therapy as well. And then there's just the straight up, it's called, what is it? I can't remember the acronym. Sorry.
We'll figure it out. I'll link it in the show notes, but if you remember, let me know and I can post it up what you're thinking.
Yeah. So if anyone is really struggling with where to begin to get honest about your emotions and the thoughts that surround those emotions and the actions that surround those emotions, because, and just look at it. You don't have to change anything. And I want to take pressure off people to change things, because really just looking at it sometimes will let it shift itself. They're like, oh, that's that thing I do where I'm trying to earn love by giving love. And I'm just going to see that. And when I see that I'm earning love to give love, like giving love to earn love, I can be like, is this actually the way to serve what I want? Is this actually going to get me what I want? Or is it resting on this belief that's never been true about how I get what I want? And I work with a lot of clients on polarity as well. But
I was going to say that's actually a good transition, because we're bumping up at the end right now, but I want to talk a little bit about what you're doing right now. So how have you transitioned? Give us a little idea as far as what's happening now for you.
Yeah, well, I had a bachelor's degree in psychology, and I had always thought that I might get a master's degree and be a relationship counselor. And I ended up actually being a coach instead. And the difference that I see here is that a counselor is going to help you to get back to baseline when you're really, really suffering. And a coach is going to help you to get from your baseline to your excellence. Mm-hmm. So I don't really work with people in the throes of abusive relationships. I don't work with people who are diagnosed if they're not working with another professional. Like, I'm not the primary professional. A lot of my clients also have psychologists mm-hmm. that they work with, or psychiatrists that they work with, which is great because I'm not a mental health practitioner. What I'm really concerned with is how to get people to excellence. And actually, a lot of anxiety disappears when you start thinking of things in this way. But yeah, right now I'm running groups every 3 weeks. So from whenever you hear this, there's going to be a women's group and a men's group that runs. And I split based on the genders because the way that men are raised is really distinct from the way that women are raised in this culture. And if anyone is non-binary or gender non-conforming, we can chat about it. And I'd love to make my work accessible. But I see that every person has a different energetic configuration. And I see that our culture really sways to preferring the masculine energetic expression. So things like achievement, things mm-hmm. like doing, mm-hmm. Productivity, all of that is in the masculine energetic. It's like go, 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 mm-hmm. and hustle. That's a masculine energetic. And then the feminine energetic is one of like chaos and creation. It's like non-linear, not time bound. It's very much about receiving and not really about doing. It's about being. What I've noticed in our society is that we've begun to prefer that, or we have been for a long time. So I teach men and women how to serve the feminine energy to bring into balance, because equality is about our value that we place on each one. And devaluing the feminine energetic actually hurts men just as much as it hurts women, because mm-hmm. men have feminine energy as well. And women, there's no right energetic balance. Every person has their unique energetic balance. But I see a lot of women suffering because they want the masculine energy from men. They want a provider, they want a protector, and yet they can't actually relinquish the provider and the protector that's engaged within them. And so they can't drop into that feminine surrender where they can allow someone to provide it for them, because they're so used to providing it for themselves. And it's so scary to think about abandoning providing all of those things for yourself when you've done it your whole life and no one's ever been trustworthy.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So as we're closing up here, I know that a lot of people out there probably want to find you. I found you on Instagram. Where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing and follow you or what have you?
Yeah, my Instagram is @selfishlove, and the SELF1SH. So the I is a 1 instead of an I. So selfish love, and that's all about how you can put yourself first, and actually your relationships go a lot better when you're selfish than mm-hmm. they do if you're not.
Yes.
And so that's pure codependency mm-hmm. Relief right there. Prioritizing yourself, that's the number one thing to get rid of codependency. And then I'm also on Facebook. I post a lot on Facebook. You can follow me. I don't accept friend requests unless they come with a message. So if you message me that you found me on this podcast, I will probably accept your friend request. But if your friend request comes without a message, then I won't be accepting that. But can you link to it or something?
I will.
Don't really know.
Yeah, I'll link everything. Work. Yeah, I'll link everything in the show.
Cool. Yeah, because I don't have a page on Facebook. I've just curated a pretty extensive audience on my personal page. So
I love your stuff on Facebook too. For me, it's like super cathartic and poetic. So, well, I so appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know it was great to hear from you for all those magnificent souls out there. So, we'll see you next time, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
All right. Bye.